TESOL Presents Free Friday webinars. I'm Shelly Sanchez-Carroll, and I am coming to you from Texas, from Splendora, Texas. So it's great to see you here. Hi. We're going to talk about poetry and some really cool web tools, but also some really cool apps. So that way you can celebrate this digitally, because I think there's so many great ways to bring poetry to life, especially for students. I really believe that anyone can be a poet, and I think that one of the reasons why is because it appeals to a lot of different people. And you may think that it's only a girl thing, but when the boys, you can tell them basically that, for example, rap is poetry. There's also spoken poetry, like spoken word poetry. And so a lot of boys can also appeal to the poetry. Oh, the pug, he's not here. Sorry, he didn't travel with me today. By the way, we're here every Friday. You can get a certificate. And I'm going to update the certificates today because this is a new one to celebrate National Poetry Month. But I really like this by Robert Frost, a very famous poet. Can you write in the chat box which of his poems that is very, very, very famous that you may know? See if you can guess this. Yes, very good. Part 10 it was the, well, 2 roads in the road less travel. Yes, and Peggy, very good. And he says, and I think this is really good about language, is that poetry, it's based on emotion. And when we are able to express our emotion and put it out there, that's a very scary thing for our students. But it's also a way that we can present different issues, and I'm going to show you that. So, for example, today I discovered this incredible poem about cyberbullying, and it wasn't about cyberbullying. It didn't say about bullying in general, but it was about how words hurt us. And it talked about words, and it gave all these scenarios, and it was spoken word poetry, and how these words really impacted the future of these people. Words like pork chop, as somebody was called pork chop, words like ugly. And so it was just an incredible poem, and a teacher had told me in the forum that she used this with her students, and they really found this appealing. So poetry is not only something that we can celebrate now, but it's a great way that when we want to do things like we want to share literature, or we want to teach language, or we even want to teach a grammar structure, or even if you want to introduce students to a difficult subject like science or math, you can share with them a poem with these concepts, and they can begin to feel connected to that topic. So there's different ways that we can use poetry, and we don't need to explicitly say teach poetry. Yes, VJ, and we have a math aficionado in our crowd today, which is really incredible. And they do have poems on YouTube and Vimeo that are animated, and we can use these tools. But let's start first about a poetry ePortfolio, because a lot of times we want our students to collect different poems on the web. And there's so many curation tools that make this really beautiful. So when you think about something like the word curation, where do you hear the word curator? Where does that word come from? Yes, art, exactly. And so one of the things that you can do is now you can basically make your own gallery online with different tools. So what they do is you can bookmark sites, and you can bookmark videos and everything, and you make it sort of like your gallery of bookmarks, so it looks like art. If you combine that with poetry, it does something very beautiful. So I'm going to show you a few tools that make that possible, where it does that curation, and your students will enjoy it because it's beautiful. One of them is EduClipper. And EduClipper is sort of like a Pinterest with education in mind, so it's safe. But the great thing about EduClipper is that it sort of works like Pinterest. So you can make boards, and you can do things like you can pin poems. You can make them very beautiful, and you can pin lots of things, or you can pin videos of poems. So you can encourage your students while they're learning about different poetry to go and pin their favorite poems. And you can do a lot of projects with this. Every single day you can put a topic. The great thing about EduClipper is it has these portfolios, but it also lets you talk about them, and it lets you leave comments. So you can like each other's poetry. You can have your students like each other's poetry. You can have them discuss the poem, why they really liked it, and then they can go and they can do an example of that poem. So, or a poem inspired by that topic. And that's what I do with my students. So, for example, one of the ones that I start off with is haikus, because I think haikus are very easy, and I think it appeals to both genders. It's also a great way for me to teach culture, because haikus generally come from what country? You can put that in the chat box. And so when I give them the structure, and also it's a great way to show them poetry doesn't have to rhyme, because a lot of times that's what they think is that it has to rhyme. So they can find these examples, and then after they find examples that they really like sometimes I'll share with them the poetry, the haikus, they're Western haikus, of Jack Kerouac. Did you know Jack Kerouac made awesome Western haikus? He does. Another really great tool, and M. Keeney just mentioned it. Well, I'll show you this first. So you can make it like an ePortfolio, and they can have lots of design options. They can put their own textures, so they can really make it into that kind of gallery feel. So that's what I love about EduClipper. The other great thing is you can put it as an assignment. So when you put it as an assignment, it's an easy way to grade. You don't have to worry about putting it in a different place, about them turning it in. It's all there for you, and it's free. You can do this on your iPad, or you can do this on your laptop. So it appeals because it's on both devices. And Kenny mentioned Pinterest. And yes, Pinterest is a lovely way to put poetry. And as you can see in this particular board here, you have where they have videos, and then they highlight different types of poems that they like. They also have it to where it's they also have different kinds of poetry written out. Now, if you want to make a really cool design, and they will, because your students are like that, they love really beautiful things. So what I recommend is a service. We actually did a webinar on Pinterest. And so one of the tools, so you can make these kind of Word documents look really beautiful, because the problem with Pinterest is you can't pin everything. Well, you can if you use the tool Pinstamatic. So Pinstamatic.com is going to allow you to make these really beautiful visual poems. Another one is when they start writing their own poetry, they might want to have a digital scrapbook. So what are ways that they can have digital scrapbooks? One of my favorite tools, and it's appealing for little kids as well, but it's littlebirdtells.com. Oh, I forgot to put Storyboard.com, but Storyboard.com would be an amazing way to have a poetry book. They could feature their poems that they've done throughout the unit, if you have a poetry unit, or poems that they were inspired, and they could do it with Storyboard.com. That would be one of the easiest ways to do it, and you can embed it and everything. But Little Bird Tells, I love. Why would you do Little Bird Tells? Theodora, one of the things you can do is you can click off my video. If you go to the top, you'll see an X after you click on my video, and then it'll make it come off, and then that'll probably do well for your bandwidth. But littlebirdtells.com is great for language learners, especially because you can speak. So you write, you can, and I think that's very important. It's very important that we get our learners, especially our language learners, to recite their poetry, at least one or two. I have my students go in front of the class, and they actually choose. They have to choose a couple of poems. So one of the things they do is, the first one is they recite a poem that they really love from English, from the whole unit. And then they recite one in their native tongue. And I think that's very important because research shows that if you're very literate in your own native language, that you're going to have a higher literacy in English. So it's really important that we get our students to start sharing their poetry. And it's a great way to teach culture. If you know about CLIL, then CLIL says that we should support cultural learning as well. And it's a great way for my students to come. And I tell them to make it come alive. So it's a great day. It's a great learning day for the class. They're allowed to have others join them and help them. So sometimes they'll have a friend that plays the guitar while they recite their poem. Another time I had one read about shoes, red shoes. And what she did is she brought red shoes that were very glittery, and she put those, and then she read her poem. So that's what I mean by come alive. Like, they're allowed to make it into the kind of presentation that they want to. And I really encourage that, whether they put, I tell them to add some kind of visual element or some kind of sound element. And then they can do the technology presentation now. So that's why I like Little Bird Tales, because they can draw, they can add text, they can add their own pictures. There's so much they can do with littlebirdtales.com, and they can embed that in a wiki or blog, and it's free. The app isn't free. You have to do it on the computer. You can pay for the app, though. Another really great tool is voicethread.com. You can see this example right here. You can have the whole entire class go, and they can say what they can collect their favorite poems, put them up there. They can put a link to it. They can put their own poetry there. It could be a whole class poetry book. And then they can go and they can recite. They can even doodle, and when they're leaving comments on each other's poems, they can do something like they can circle a line and they can say, this is the part that I really liked, or I love, this is iambic pentameter. So if you want to go and you want to do specific points of a poem, then one of the things you can do is you can have them use VoiceThread, and they can go and they can use the doodle tool and mark specific parts of a poetry. Of a poem. One of the things about poetry too is, and VoiceThread, I've used VoiceThread with as young as 4 years old. So VoiceThread and all the way to 80 years old. So it's one of those tools that is appealing for many different types of ages. And you can use it on your iPad, or you can use it on your computer as well, and you can even set up accounts. You hear me talk about Buncee a lot. Well, Buncee now has an educator account. And Buncee, what it does is it's like an interactive poster. It's really great. It's my replacement for Glogster because, one, Glogster takes forever to load. It crashes too many times. If you're in a place with very low bandwidth, Glogster just crashes in the middle, and your students get really frustrated because they did all this work and it doesn't save any of the work. So one of the things I do is I really like Buncee for that. Now at EduBuncee, they have examples. So you could go to English Language Arts, and you can even find poetry books and poetry templates, and you can use it. You can also, this is online, and they've created it just for teachers as well. But your students can make an account on Buncee.com. Now they can add different things. It's like Glogster. They have backgrounds. They have where they can add photos, PDFs. They can add videos. They can add audio. They can do a SoundCloud. The audio is through SoundCloud. So they can actually go and they can record themselves reciting their poems, and then they can post that, and they can play the sound. Or they can find music to go along with the poetry experience. They can add text, they can add stickers, messages, quotes, they can even draw. They can draw on the computer, or they can use it as an app, and they can draw on the app. So Buncee is something that I really like. You can embed it too. You can leave comments and things like that. This is what the app looks like. You can take a picture and you can draw, or you can add text, you can add frames. There's lots and lots of things you can do. And of course, Glogster.com, you could do a poetry portfolio there. A lot of students love it. If you just search poetry, you're going to find tons of teen examples. The problem is, like I said, I think that Glogster, first of all, it shows iffy stuff. They do not go and filter a lot of it unless you have the Edu Glogster, but I believe you have to pay for that. And a lot of times I just find the bandwidth. Bite Slides is another one, and I forgot to add that one. But the other one that I really like is Book Creator. So the reason I have an app here is because you may not know, but Book Creator is now not only for iTunes. It's not only iOS, it's an Android app as well. It's the easiest way to make a digital book. It's also got things for students with learning needs, such as if they're autistic, if they're dyslexic, if they're deaf. It has a whole bunch of things made specifically for that. So they have closed captioning, they have where to read out loud, just so many things. The people at Book Creator are just so wonderful. You can even add videos. So if they have a poetry video that they really like, and if you go on YouTube, you can find tons of them by different types of artists, and they're spoken, and it's really nice. So it's a really great way to have a poetry book that your students would really love. Let's talk about individual poems. Yes, it's free, Doris. All the tools that I show you are free because I believe there's so many great tools out there and they're free, and that's what I believe in. I love free, so that's what I share with teachers. Animate poems. So how can our students make their poems actually come to life? Well, they can do this through different types of apps and also that speak and things like that. So you could do something like a Telegami or Voki, but I like when the words are animated because I think that's the focus of poetry. So I try to find apps where the words would come and animate. One of them is readtapestry.com. So Tapestry is many different words, and they can do things with the pictures and the words flip around. So you really have to check it out. It's a great way. It's pretty simple to use, and it's an app. So it's a free app. You can go to readtapestry.com. You can even just find examples. So if you just want to show examples from Read Tapestry, then you can see it. It's a very great way. It's a storytelling tool, an app. Well, it's mostly an app. And the other one is Powtoon.com. Now, I have my teachers use Powtoon.com. I teach online. I'm a professor from Madrid now, so I'm very happy about this. But my students, they use these tools. My students are teachers, but they use them with their teens. I was sharing some today from their high school teens, one from Greece. I was sharing it on Twitter, and one of the things is that they love Powtoons. The students just love it. And now they have Powtoon slides. They just came out with that this week. So now you can do slide presentations as well. The great thing about Powtoons is it really does focus on the words, and it does really cool things. Like here, you have where he's taking a paint, and he's making and the words pop out. So they have it to where it's a pretty easy way to make these kind of things come to life. They can add popular music. They can do so much with Powtoons. It has 30 seconds for free, and this is something you do as a web tool. So there are other really cool sites out there and ideas. One way is to use something like Tagcedo, where you could do something like a word cloud of poetry. And one of the ideas I have, of course, this is a great way to introduce themselves. They could do things like an acrostic poem, they could do an about me poem, or they can do something which you can show, and I'll show you a video link, and you can go and you can look at it. But you can give them an example of a really powerful poem, and they can do a response to it. So this particular idea, they could do something where they could take something that somebody has said, like a really negative word, and they can make a poem that really makes that word into something beautiful. So now that poem becomes something, it becomes more like a cyberbullying project where we can take the words that people call us because all of our students can identify with that. They can identify with being really hurt or things that are insecure, they're insecure with, and really make them feel like see that in a good way. Something like, for example, long hands, or something like a big nose. Like, why would that be something beautiful in another way? So they can do that about a poem. Worditout is a really great one. They have different types of poetry that you can do with that. And we have a presentation on poetry. On Wordcloud tools. So you can always go back and look at that as well. We have over 100 presentations, nearly 200 now. Actually, we might have made the 200 mark, so that's pretty cool. Language Garden. Language Garden, you can add different types of poetry on there, and you can when you highlight these, the great thing about Language Garden, they even have a Facebook, but it's a tool. It's sort of like a Prezi in a way. That's the way David he's a good friend of mine. That's the way he kind of made it to where if you know how to use Language Garden, you can do that as well. Yes, BJ, you'll get access to the slides and also the bookmarks at the end of this presentation for sure. The other thing that they have here with Language Garden is these highlights. This focuses on the language. So if you're trying to focus on a grammar structure or repetition, or you really want to point something out, so if you have your students make a poem based on a structure, then they can do this, and then they can highlight that structure so they can find it within themselves, for themselves. They can, and so it's a really good tool for language teachers specifically. It was made for that. Now, one in the past that I've shared, where am I going? Okay, here we go. So another way, so my students right now, what we're doing is we're taking literature, or we're taking things that students may not always find appealing that we're going to teach, and we have to make it into a comic. So I thought this was a great example. I just got this from one of my students this week, and she did a comic of Phenomenal Woman by Maya Angelou, which happens to be one of my favorite poems. So even with comics, you can bring something to life. You can bring poetry to life, and it may be something that you never thought of before. She did this with comicshead.com. You can go to Comicshead Live. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with poetry. You can find a lot about actually teaching poetry, about the genre and the different types of poems out there. And there's really thousands of structures. There's sonnets, there's onomatopoeia, there's so many different types of poems out there. And haikus, diamante, there's so many different types of poetry forms out there. If you go to scholastic.com, they have this little flash where they'll take them through and walk them through writing their own poetry, but it'll also give them the structure and teach them about that poetry as well. And of course, poetry magnets are always a great idea, I think. And this is one of the first ways that I taught with students. In fact, I did this in 2000, I want to say. I was working with a bunch of homeless students, and so what we did is we did the old school. We did cookie sheets. I bought a bunch of cookie sheets. You can get those at the €1 store, the dollar store, usually. Anything that's flat and is magnetic. And then, but you don't necessarily have to do magnetics. If you looked at our masking tape webinar, then you could do masking tape as well. And so what happens is the students put it, and then I actually had them read it out loud, what they put. And when you're working with learners who maybe have low literacy, or they're low language learners, or then you can, or maybe they just need inspiration, magnetic poetry is a great way, because they don't have to think of the words right away. They can just move it around, and then they get inspired, and then they can make poetry from that. So that might be a good way to start if you're working with, I've worked with refugees and those who've had really low literacy because they haven't had any lot of formal schooling. So if that's the case, you can do that. You can find a lot of great poetry video lessons. I was telling you how a lot of times you can inspire your students by showing them a video. And Vimeo and YouTube both have really fantastic narrated poems. And so a lot of these you can find on lessonstream.org, which is Jamie Ketty's site, and he even has full lesson plans for them. You can print them out on a PDF, they're free, and he even has them by level. He has adults, he has teens, a young learner, poetry, so you can get ideas from him. And today I just joined and discovered Teacher Poets, which is this new project by Chris Lehman, not the Chris Lehman, but Chris Lehman, I think is his Twitter handle, and he's leading this. And it's a Google Plus community, so if you're a teacher writer, every day they have a prompt, but they also share really incredible poetry tools. There's so many in there that I didn't even share them all, but they're always sharing all the time. People like Kevin Hodgson, Dog Tracks, is part of the group, and now me, I'm part of that group. So you can find this on my Google Plus page, or you can look up Teacher Poets Community on your community sites and anyone can join and it's free. So one of these that I did find, which is this beautiful poem from Vimeo, and it's called To This Day, and this is the one where it's an animated poem, and it talks about how this poet was picked on for being big and was called Pork Chop. And then he talks about a girl who was picked on in the 3rd grade with him and she was called Ugly. And he talks about their lives and growing up as adults. And the students really responded to this. So we can show these videos and our students can look at them, and then they can go and they can create their own spoken poetry. You can do it over a theme. You can do something like cyberbullying, or instead of doing like a public service announcement, or maybe things like, for example, when it's kindness, in national kindness, or now we're going to have, for example, you might want to do cultural poems this way. You may want to show different types of culture poems because we do have the World Cup coming. And Bruno's here from Brazil, and Priscilla as well. So it's a good time for students to start learning about different cultures and countries, is that you can go and you can introduce all the countries that are going to be part of the World Cup, and you can do it with the poems from that country, different poets from that country as well. There's a lot of cool apps. One of the things is to have an app that will really have them speak, I think. And so 30 Hands is one of those. It lets you have different types of slides and make a video. The people at 30 Hands have made it pretty easy. You can have it to where you can drag and drop pictures. You can have lots of slides. You can have music. You can use something like Magisto as well, or Animoto. All of them make these videos where also your students can have the words pop out. The reason why I shared 30 Hands is because you can narrate it. You can add your voice. Now, the great thing is that your students do not have to. So after they see the video, like the one that I showed you with Vimeo, then they can go and they can have their own narrated poetry, which I think is really good. They can do this with Moozee as well. Moozee has different types of apps, but Moozee actually has one of the apps where the words come out and it makes noises. It even goes like phew, and it goes big and low, and it makes like a little, it's really easy because all you do is type, and after they type their poem, they just go and they choose what kind of animation they want. It's really fast. They can do it if they've already, okay, so if you work in a setting where you go to a lab and you can only use it for like 10 minutes or something, this is a great project. So what you do is you go to Moozee, and you have to go to the specific one where it animates whatever they type. And it creates a video. So what they can do is, if they've already written the poetry down, if you lack technology, then one of the things they can do is they can go and they can do it on either, if you have a cart and you want them to use the app to do it with the cart, they can do it with an app, or they can go to the lab and they can do it, and it'll take them less than 10 minutes to do this. I've done this in a workshop before in Israel. They did it really fast. It took 5 minutes. They hadn't prepared anything, so that's one way you can do it. Write about this. It's really great. There's also Tell About This, so you can use them both. They're free. This was written by Dream Vision, at Dream Ambition on Twitter, but he's a teacher. Well, he was a teacher, and he created these wonderful apps for language learners and also for writing and for English. So the students can take their own pictures. They can add them. You might have to pay for that option. It has voice prompts, so it even has prompts to inspire them to write poetry. It's just a great, fantastic app, and then they just type it in on the app. So that's really nice feature. They can do something with Pic Collage, and Pic Collage is on Android. It's on iOS. They can put text. A lot of students really love using Pic Collage. Imagechef. It allows you to do Wordcloud tools, so they can make poetry that way. You can even see in the bottom next to the dog, it says visual poetry. So it even has a section that focuses on visual poetry. Now, Imagechef, I believe, is only for iOS. So one of the things that I ask you to do, and you notice I'm looking down, the reason is because I'm trying to find something. What I want to show you is a stylist, okay? You don't have to use this particular stylist. I have one like this. What does a stylist do? A stylist allows you to write on an app. So I use an app called Penultimate. I actually keep a diary on my Penultimate because it lets me write. I even put to-do lists. See? That's my handwriting. It's ugly. I know. It's not that great. But you can do it with your... in fact, I'll do it right now. I choose a color. So the ones that have drawing apps, like Buncee I showed you and stuff, then one of the things you can do is you can choose a color. I already chose one. I can even choose what kind. And then I say, I'm just going to put real hello. But notice how I wrote with it. So I wanted to show you that because a lot of times they ask how you can use people look at Stylist and they ask me, well, how do you use it? So you can use that on anything. They're very inexpensive. Last time Peggy found on American TESOL, on Amazon, she found a bunch of really inexpensive ones for us. So you can, I did say I was going to share all these bookmarks, and you can find them all if you go to my Pearl Tree. So I'm going to share this Pearl Tree with you. As soon as I find the link. But when you can find all the bookmarks for that too. I'm still bookmarking the ones like, for example, the Google Plus community. And then I will also share with you the slides. And I'll probably do a blog post either today or tomorrow based on this, so you can find all of this. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope you got some really great ideas or some free web tools or free apps that will help your students get excited about actually writing poetry. You can always get a certificate for coming today, of course, and let me get this for you. Yark. Here we go. I got the Pearl Tree app, so there you go. You can find all of those. So thank you so much. And there's me and Roscoe. There's your Roscoe. And let me stop the recording so that way it could be the